You might have heard all of the noise over the past week over European sovereignty for its critical industries. Can Europe go it alone if it decides it needs to cut ties with the US or China? Would its digital factories fail and its AIs just stop replying? Well, in this episode of The Dip, I spoke to Cedrik, Neike, who's in charge of everything digital at the German industrial firm Siemens. They're the biggest company for factory automation and software in the world. So I asked him if China is dictating Europe's future simply because the economics of how they make stuff is unbeatable.
If you look at manufacturing, China is the manufacturing place in the world. If you want to see the most modern factories, the most advanced manufacturers, you go to China. So you have to be hyper competitive in China. So one of the things we did is we moved actually R&D, development resources and supply chain resources into China to be able to compete against those Chinese competitors. It's like if you want this gym in which you work out with the people which are the fittest, and in that space is China. So we take them very seriously, and that's one thing we did. We also moved some of the resources into the US because that market also goes in the direction. So yes, the world has changed. It's a much more global world. It's a world where you have champions which are coming out of China, out of the US, but perhaps also at some space out of India. And you need to adapt and forward invest into those changes rather than being shaped by them.
Okay, now moving to Europe, Ursula von der Leyen has said that Europe must de-risk its economy and not get too tangled up in all of the potential geopolitical risks. Is Siemens in a position to be able to navigate this complex geopolitical world, let's say?
We all need to sort of work with the new realities. I mean, we have an advantage that Werner von Siemens, when it was created in 1847, Werner sent two of his brothers, one to London and one to actually St. Petersburg, to be able to set up those capabilities. What do I mean by this? Is Siemens has been very, very global in its footprint and its development for a long time. So we have the capability to be very close to the market, but that's being accelerated, to be very honest. So we're looking at our supply chain and making sure that they're on a global level are as independent as possible. But the reality, the world is highly, highly interdependent, and we want to leverage the capabilities we have by really interconnecting this world. So we are adapting for the worst case, but we're preparing for the worst case and adapting for it, but we're hoping also for the best case in which this goes in the right direction in terms of those supply chains. So yes, we're prepared. Much more important will be our customers prepared, because if we are super prepared but our customers are not, that's an issue. So we need to work with our customers also to make that happen in really localizing their supply chain and their development also.
Okay, and just one of the projects which Siemens is involved with on the software level is this industrial AI cloud, which was launched by Deutsche Telekom and NVIDIA. And it's one of their kind of pushes for digital sovereignty, digital onshoring, to make sure that the data is handled in Europe. Why did you think that your company should be part of this €1 billion project?
Because we have different customers and they have different demands. So just for everybody, Siemens is one, if not the biggest industrial software provider in the world. Most people don't know this. Not only that we're big in automation, where every third machine is from us, but on the software side. And a lot of our European customers say, I want to have those software which helps me design a product, simulate and test it, or plan my factory, should be in a European cloud environment, on an NVIDIA environment. And that's why we work with Deutsche Telekom to make this software available on those environments. We work with many sort of different vendors, but there's definitely a market, especially for, if you think more of defense or critical infrastructure, which says, I want to have a cloud infrastructure which actually reflects my needs in terms of independence and sovereignty.
But does it really offer digital sovereignty when the AI stack is American, let's say, and the chips are Taiwanese, and at this point, there is no major European alternative which can compete with that?
I mean, it would be completely foolish to think that we will ever have a completely European software stack. We will have a completely European PC, GPU, etc. The reality is that the world is extremely intertwined, and it's good. As long as we're dependent on each other, we need each other, and we need to work with each other and find ways. So my point of view is we can de-risk it, but we can never completely de-risk it. So the importance is, what can we do to be able to have certain periods of stability if things change and can adapt to it, but we will always be dependent on each other.
But in this time of kind of geopolitical risk, with some sort of event which could happen. We can't predict what it might be, but which could disrupt this kind of tech supply chain. What are you telling your customers to reassure them? Because if we are so tied up in this complicated world with all of this very crucial hardware coming from all of these other places, then we may struggle if there is an event, whatever that may be.
So the thing I tell all of my customers is you cannot predict the future. I'm always being asked, what is so-and-so going to do and so-and-so going to... I don't know, right? All I can say is in times of these changing environments, the only thing you can do is focus on your agility. So I'm asking all of my customers is be as agile as possible in your supply chain. So don't have only one supplier, but 2 or 3 and them to be sort of separated. Have your factories way more adaptable. So the time in which I built my factory in the lowest cost country to be able to have cheap labor and feed the world from it, that time is over. So I'm asking my customers, think through it, take the capability to really sort of build agility and go as much digital as possible, because when you're digital, you can actually do a lot of the data before you do this. So for example, we have a digital twin of all of our supply chain. So if a black swan or I don't know is happening, supply crisis in chips, there's no chips more available, we can act extremely fast. So we're sharing with our...
So you can model digitally what might happen in the physical.
Exactly, and what the best reaction would be to be able to do this. We do this if there's an earthquake, we said, okay, what are the other suppliers? What do we need to do? Can we reprogram our factories? If we have different sort of components, can we test them before we actually produce them? So you really need to, what we call it a shift left. We shift into the digital world because there you can do a lot of things you couldn't actually do physically, and then choose the best option at that time.
Okay, but currently more than half of the 800 largest European companies, which were surveyed by Accenture, have yet to scale any major AI investment. And at the same time, the average European worker produces only 76% as much as their US counterpart. There's no shortage of offerings from Siemens and from all kinds of levels when it comes to AI, whether it's S&P and Sage and all of these other kind of corporate offerings from AI. So why are companies like yours still having to state the case for AI? Why isn't there this massive buy-in?
Because people do not like change. I mean, let's be very honest. We love change when it happens to others, but we don't like it when it happens to ourselves. So the biggest thing we do as Siemens is to change ourselves in terms of adopting AI. So we're building some of the most advanced factories ourselves, because in Silicon Valley, you have something which is called eat your own dog food, right? Which means that your technology, you use it first to show everybody it works. I'm half French, we call it drink your own champagne. So we're trying to really sort of use it in the right environment. So we're using this technology to show our customers that we can be more agile, we can be more flexible, and we can react faster. So the first thing is don't preach it, do it yourself, show that it works, and then you share it. And in most of our factories, we have 2,000, 300,000 customers which come per year looking at what we're doing. So that's what I would say is don't preach, show, and then share.
So one of those examples which Siemens has put forward as drinking your own champagne, as you would put it, is building the world's first fully AI-driven adaptive manufacturing sites. Okay, and you'll get into what that exactly means in a second. And you're putting your money where your mouth is and starting with Siemens electronic factory in Germany. What will this factory do so differently? And is this the realization of a dark factory, or how do you define?
So let me go a step back. So the first thing is where everybody is being careful investing in Europe and in Germany, we have committed to invest in Germany. And we committed to invest in Germany in probably one of our older factories. The Electronic Werk Erlangen, which is that factory, has been a factory which over the last 40 years, we continuously evolved from a factory which, it's interesting, it has the same amount of people, but it has hundreds of robots, hundreds of AI environments. And we said, look, let's take it to the next step. And I'll go a bit back because we always have a twin. So the factory in Erlangen has a digital twin and a real twin in Nanjing in China. We just got the prize from the World Economic Forum for most digitally native factory in Nanjing. And we built this factory, which is completely new, in the digital world first. We're taking this now to the next level with NVIDIA because we built this complete factory first in the metaverse, if you want, together with NVIDIA. So that means that we plan everything. What happens if something changes? What happens with the supply coming in? How do we optimize energy? So we're doing this, it's a bit like a video game if you think about it, to optimize and do everything. So then when we build it, it works. But now comes your question. Once you have a digital twin of a real factory, why not keep this digital twin and have it completely sort of evolve with the factory? Because most people don't know, 40% of our factory in Erlangen changes every year. So factory continuously live, it changes. There's a new line, there's new technology. And once you have it in the digital world, you can plan for it much, much better. So this AI brain will help us, if you have a new product, to see, does it fit into our factory? If not, how do I optimize the factory? Then it will produce it. It will learn from its mistake. It will optimize it. And then if a change happens because, I don't know, you don't get a chip from Taiwan or you don't get sort of rare earths from somebody else, we can adapt and then make this factory more advanced. And it basically means most digital initiatives have failed because they were so-called digital islands. I'll do a little bit digital here, a little bit digital here, a little bit digital here. Imagine you have an email and a WhatsApp and they don't communicate. We are linking those elements together, and it's the first time we do this end-to-end for a factory in the world together with NVIDIA and ourselves, and we're trying it ourselves to see that it works.
But there are people involved in the factory.
Same amount of people. The interesting part is there will be dark factories. This will not be a dark factory. We will have the same amount of people, but we will be probably 1,000 times more flexible. We'll probably have way more output. The quality will increase dramatically. That's what we've always done. And our factories bring between 7 to 9% productivity every year, thanks to digital and now AI. And we need to do this to be able to be competitive in Germany.
Okay, and a lot of people are saying this about the Mittelstand in Germany as well, the small and medium-sized companies, which are often stated as the backbone of the German economy. But, when you approach a potential customer and you see they're not data ready, they might have data, but it's not ready to plug in, they've no data team, they maybe have older machines which produce, let's say, messy data, which is hard for AI to actually act upon. They may not even have the investment resources to draw on, or even when they buy a new machine, it's easy to collateralize and underwrite, but you can't really do that with something as uncertain and as vague as AI. What do you tell these people who, on the one hand, are getting this pressure saying you have to implement AI, but they've got this list of very real-world challenges?
I mean, we're talking here about world champions. These are companies which are extremely good at what they do, right? In very specific areas. And you go to the most remote places in Germany, and then you have the leader in, I don't know, building vacuum pumps or something. It's pretty amazing. So what do we tell them? One of the things we tell them is you should band together. So not each one of you can replicate what a Siemens does, but if 10 of you, 20 of you come together, and we did this in VDMA with the Maschinenbau. We said, look, you 10, the Grobs, the Trumpf, the DMG Murray, you come together, you share the data, and we will build AI model and digital models you can share then. So instead of doing it 10 times, let's do it one, and let's utilize it to be able to be competitive.
But isn't the difficulty with the Mittelstand that they're all so differently specialized in many different ways? Or do you see a massive overlap between them?
There is, like always, 80 to 90% is similar, and the 10% differentiation is really what makes the difference. It's still all automation. I mean, I said 30% of all the brains in the world in factories come from Siemens, the so-called PLC. It's the same brain, right? But it's being used for super high machines to build airplanes, to build cars, to make medicine. And so what we're trying is, don't try to differentiate by trying to replicate these 80%, which all of you are similar, but on the 20 to 10%, which really makes you so unique and so specific. So, and I think that's where a lot of digital projects failed, is everybody tried to reinvent the wheel, and that's the worst. And that's what open source, for example, is great. Use what's out there. Use the software capabilities out there, and then differentiate in the things which really make you special.
Okay, but what if, let's say, your AI, which helps with the type of automation code that you might need on a factory line, what if that code causes an incident? Who is liable? Is it Siemens? Is it the customer? Or is it the person who actually presses the button?
And that's the biggest issue which we have on consumer AI versus sort of industrial AI. In consumer AI, If one of my kids write an essay and it's hallucinating, then he gets a bad grade. If something happens on the shop floor, somebody might get injured or die. So we are putting a lot of effort to make sure that we build security mechanisms on top of AI to be able to do it. A bit like autonomous driving. Autonomous driving is also the logic at step by step to go forward. So it will be first will be a co-pilot. And I have a fantastic example. Can I go a step back? When robots were introduced, most people were afraid of robots because they thought they'll take my job. Now AI is introduced, most people are afraid of AI to not be the right quality or take their jobs. We gave co-pilots to everybody in Erlangen for 3 weeks. People were very careful, but once they had it, they loved it. And the less experience they had, the more they loved the co-pilot because it helped them sort of solve issues during the night, for example, if a machine broke down. So what I'm trying to tell you is that at the beginning, AI will be sort of an assistant. And as we get more and more sure about it, it will take more and more capabilities, but it will never replace the human. New jobs will appear.
It will always, especially critical tasks, will always require human sign-off.
Or human supervision.
And so
until AI proves that it's better than humans, right? We need to also look at.
But you do think at some point you will have entire factories where you don't need human sign-off, and they will be safe and effective and incident-free.
As I said, I could have not imagined the future as it is for 5 years ago. I cannot tell you how the future is going forward. I think more and more will actually be done by automation, but new roles will happen. We will have AI detectives which will go in if something goes wrong and try to find out where did the AI went wrong. I mean, new jobs will appear and as such. So I think the new flexibility will bring new sort of opportunities with it.
Okay, your CEO, Roland Busch, says that Germany is still held back by regulations and bureaucracy, and it's a long-time complaint for many businesses. But why are we still talking about it all this time later? Why hasn't any progress been done? And are you seeing any progress on that front? Is bureaucracy actually being chipped away? Many governments have promised it, but it's still a complaint of industry in Germany.
The reality is that if I would see the biggest disadvantage we have in Europe, and I will not talk only about Germany, I would see that bureaucracy and especially regulation is the biggest issue. And it has not disappeared. There's good ideas like the omnibus, for example, but the omnibus is trying to sort of make things simpler, but there is an over-regulation and a sort of overlap of regulation. So if you have 5 regulation, you don't know, do I take A, B, or C, or is there an overlap between the two? So I think there's a lot of talk. We now need the action and we need the impact. And I have a very concrete one. The Cyber Resilience Act is supposed to protect infrastructure, but it is so defined on what it needs to do that we're spending hundreds of millions to be compliant without gaining extra security for our end customers. And this infuriates me and the industry because there's money which is being lost, which could be used to be competitive on a worldwide basis.
And one of the other things that Ursula von der Leyen said about tech in Europe is that we're in the race for AI and we're in the race for the tech of tomorrow. But it sounds like what you're saying that the EU hasn't woken up to this fact of overregulation. Do you think the EU more broadly is doing enough?
Could always do more. To be very honest, that's the one thing I would love more speed and more impact on a faster basis. There's some signs which are encouraging. There's some sign where there's more talk than actually action. And we really encourage. And look, it's very easy to complain on somebody else. Siemens is, for example, active in participating in government bodies to say, what can we actually do, right? Because complaining doesn't help anyone. We want to be very concrete on telling the EU and telling Germany on how to accelerate and which regulation to accelerate and which regulation not to implement or postpone. Because beyond a no, it's not that there's the same amount of regulation and new regulation. Every regulation is on top. So you have all of the old one plus. So we need to see which regulation can we also take away.
Okay, but do you think there's just a certain kind of path dependency in Europe and that, we missed the bus on chips, we missed the bus on the web, we missed the bus on AI. What can Europe now do in tech, the latest cutting edge tech, which, let's say, China couldn't just copy and do cheaper?
You just have to be faster. Everybody, because the knowledge is so shared in the world, everybody can go forward, and the big differentiation will be speed. We have very good people. If we simplify really the regulation, we have big industries like defense, which a massive amount is being invested. We have the interest of putting the chip industry back into Europe. I mean, ASML is always the example with Trumpf and on being super competitive. We need to be able to go forward. So my take is, us putting $500 million into Erlangen is a commitment that we think this can be done and should be done. We could have gone somewhere else and we haven't.
Okay, and just a final question. What is your key message to the leaders in Berlin and Brussels about how to push us forward in tech? What do you need from them?
So speed is of the absolute essence, and we need agility. And in order to have agility, we need to not have more regulation, but to look at which regulation we don't need anymore and focus on the regulation which really protects the consumer. We need investments to be focused. At the moment, we distribute our investments not even by countries. It's Germany versus France. It's even Brandenburg versus Bavaria. That is the wrong thing. Pull Europe as much as possible together. And we have lots of spending. Let's try to focus it and enable also local competitors or local ecosystems, if you want, to be able to have a chance, a bit like DARPA in the US, to push it forward. Europe is not lost. We have fantastic people. We have fantastic companies. If we can be a bit more together, go in one direction, be less regulated, I think we can do wonders.
Hi, it's me again. So let's just wrap up what we've just heard. First of all, I've got to be clear that Cedrik Neike is not defending a flag, whether it's the EU one or the German one. He's defending his company's bottom line. So just putting it into that context. Let's look about what he said about what's hitting the EU hard. And when it comes to China, the economics of the place are just so massively better than Europe's in manufacturing. It is cheap, but it's also high quality, that it's a market and a benchmark for companies like Siemens. And if China is where the most advanced, cost-efficient factories are being built at scale, as he says, Siemens has to compete there at local speed and local cost. And that means localizing engineering, sourcing, and product decisions. And that is something that Brussels is not entirely comfortable about, but he simply seems to describe that it is just a fact of life, that is the physics of the industry, and there's nothing you can do about it. And then there's the USA. Siemens is leaning into software and AI as a growth engine, and the US is where capital, hyperscalers, the big server farms from the likes of Microsoft's Azure or Amazon's AWS, and it's where the industrial policy tailwinds are the strongest. He said that's where the wind direction is, as he puts it, and that's why the wind direction matters, because Washington is treating chips and compute as strategic capacity, not just another market. So who are the losers in all this? Well, he made it clear in the interview, if you kind of read between the lines. He didn't say this explicitly, so it is my interpretation. But it's mid-sized European manufacturers, those ones who can't fund the data or the cloud or the skills that are needed quickly enough. And they get squeezed between Chinese cost curves and America's platform velocity that we just talked about. And European policymakers who want to position sovereignty, as they call it, as autonomy, they then discover that the best that they can buy is jurisdictional control around foreign hardware. And that's kind of my big takeaway from this interview, is what he said about that very same topic, European sovereignty. Yes, companies can get so-called digital sovereignty, and they can get it today. The EU data sits on EU hardware housed inside the EU and run to EU rules. Well, it's not EU hardware because it's manufactured elsewhere. It's just physically located inside the EU, and that's the problem. You can't mistake that, just the mere position of where the servers are, for autonomy. And he says it would be completely foolish to think that we will ever have a completely European software stack, and even admits, when it comes to hardware, that Europe is and remains dependent on other countries, like China. He says that we can reduce risk, but we can never completely de-risk. That flies in the face of what European politicians have said that they want this past week. More European independence and resilience. Whether that's even possible, well, this board member of one of the EU's most important industrial companies, he doubts it.
That was just a sneak peek of our show, The Dip. And if you like what you see, you can scan the QR code appearing on your screen right now, or you can follow us on your favorite podcast platform, or check the YouTube description for a link to find us.
But until next time, thank you very much for watching The Dip.